All right, y'all, got some big breaking news coming at you from what's supposed to be a vacation. We're like 5 minutes away from leaving for vacation, and then, of course, this news drops, which means we got to pick up the camera immediately. But the Supreme Court, there were two student loan debt cases that were in front of the Supreme Court. One of them, the Supreme Court ruled, you guys don't have standing, so that stood. And so there was a moment, a glimmer of hope and sunshine there where I was like kind of excited, like, oh my goodness. Then literally like within 2 minutes, I saw from More Perfect Union that the Supreme Court has now officially struck down Biden's student loan debt forgiveness plan. So, I mean, it goes without saying, this is absolutely devastating. This comes on the heels of yesterday. They struck down affirmative action. So this is two, right-wing decisions in a row. Let me give you some of the specifics of it here. They say the Supreme Court on Friday blocked the Biden administration's student debt relief plan, stopping more than 40 million borrowers from receiving loan forgiveness and delivering a major defeat to one of the president's key campaign promises. The high-stakes decision will limit President Biden's options to deliver on his commitment to cancel $10,000 of student loans for low and middle-income borrowers. The secretary asserts that the HEROES Act grants him the authority to cancel $430 billion of student loan principal. It does not, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote. Biden's plan would have canceled up to $20,000 in loans for Pell Grant recipients and $10,000 for other borrowers if the individual's income is less than $125,000. And then you guys know the specifics of that. So look, the gist of it is he did the student loan debt forgiveness under the HEROES Act. He signed an executive order under the HEROES Act, which was basically a COVID era law. And they're saying you don't have the authority under that. Now, what I've been arguing for a while, and many others have been arguing for a while, like the people at the Debt Collective and many experts who focus on this issue, we've been arguing you need to do it under the 1965 Higher Education Act, which gives the Secretary of Education the authority to basically do whatever they want with the loans because the federal government owns like 90% of student loan debt. So, I mean, it stands to reason. It seems intuitively true that they can do whatever they want with that debt. If they want to wipe the slate clean, they could wipe the slate clean. But the Supreme Court said this particular avenue that you went down, you're not allowed to do it. Now, I don't know. My guess is, first of all, if Biden doesn't try to strike it down another way, using the 1965 Higher Education Act, I think that is like almost political suicide for him.
Yeah,
because you already got
just pathetic.
Pathetic, yeah. You already got everybody's hopes up. It was a great policy. I gave him a lot of credit over it. He was trying to defend it in court, but obviously he hit a brick wall here. So it's like, are you going to continue the fight? And, this is his numbers plummeted among young people. If he doesn't fight, this will make it plummet even more. But, it might cut in another direction, too, in the sense that I think people know that it's a Republican Supreme Court that struck this down. So, like, will they actually blame Biden? I don't know. You mentioned, hey, maybe they'll do this. They'll use this as like a campaign issue to be like, you need to vote for us because we need more liberal justices on the court. But at the end of the day, look, this is a disaster because so many people, this was such a tremendous relief for so many people.
Yeah.
Now the Supreme Court put their middle finger up. And look, in my opinion, these are just activist judges. They have a right-wing ideology and they are activists. They're not doing the plain face reading of the law. This law has been invoked previously to eliminate certain kinds of student loan debt, even under Republican administrations. So for them to strike it down now is just a middle finger.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the Biden administration, obviously I support them fighting in every way they possibly can, but because I agree with your assessment of the character of the court, that it's a political institution and not like an, even-handed judicial institution, that it doesn't really matter what law the Biden administration used to justify the debt cancellation. They would probably strike it down in a similar 6-3 partisan fashion, but you got to try and you got to fight. And then you have to aggressively make the case in the election that, hey, if you want to actually have any sort of material benefit and receive any sort of student debt relief, we have got to change the composition of the court. And oh, by the way, I mean, I would support going further and advocating for court packing and, more aggressively asserting control over the judiciary because, yeah, it's just a political organ at this point. I saw Biden got asked about this by Nicole Wallace in what was, largely a really softball interview, but about court packing specifically. And he said something like, oh, that would make the court more political in a bad way. And it's like, that ship has sailed.
But then he also said, like, this is not a normal court at a different time yesterday.
Right.
And it's like, wait, so is it political or is it not political?
Exactly.
Right. What the hell are you
like,
talking about?
Which is it? But he's such a norms and institution.
I know.
That I have no confidence. I mean, there's no way he's going to do that. I just have zero expectation that he would. even on the question of whether he's even going to try to,
do it the 1965 Higher Education Act
I'm
way.
I'm sort of doubtful about that because he had to be dragged kicking and screaming to this.
I know.
The only reason he did it at all is because he was like forced to pledge something on the campaign trail and said it really clearly, and then he was basically like shamed into doing it totally reluctantly. So I think ideologically he does not actually agree with this policy. So I think it's just as likely that he's like, well, we tried. Supreme Court, what are you going to do?
His numbers went from 60% among young people when he announced this plan to 30% in recent weeks. So look, you want it to stay at 30%, you want it to go lower, or you want it to go up? Listen, I know this sounds radical and extreme, but it's really not. It's actually an American tradition. Abraham Lincoln ignored the Supreme Court. He was like, oh, really? I don't agree with that, and I think you're judicial tyrants and you're judicial supremacists, so why don't you go ahead and stop me with your army? Oh, that's right, you don't have an army, and I do. And he basically made the court heel. He made the court heel.
Yeah,
so there have been times where they overreached. Plessy versus Ferguson is the classic example. The entire Lochner era is a classic example, and it took a strong executive branch to bring them to heel, right? Like FDR had to do it as well. And so forget even like court packing, which I do agree with, and term limits, which I do agree with. You have provisions in the Constitution that allow for what's called court stripping or judicial stripping, which you can pass laws and say, by the way, the Supreme Court doesn't have the authority to do judicial review on this law. You're allowed to do that. That's perfectly constitutional.
Yeah.
So do it. Like, do it. You can't just sit back and let the judicial tyrants stop any kind of progress at all. So
let me also say that there's a real nihilism that has understandably set into our politics where it's like, any positive plan you put forward, it's like, okay, yeah, that sounds nice, but there's no way it's going to happen. But it's important to keep in mind, Democrats have control of the Senate right now. They're like, 5 votes away from it. Like, it's very easy to imagine Democrats being able to win the House. You get rid of the filibuster and you're off to the races.
That's right.
If you have people who can be shamed or cajoled or convinced or whatever into actually voting like a Democrat, then there's all sorts of things you could do. You could pass legislatively this sort of student debt cancellation would be more widespread and more far-reaching and have more reformist elements so that we're not just right back where we started. And you could include the provisions in there. So it's like, no, this is not even under your jurisdiction, Supreme Court. These things are possible. Don't buy into their narrative that they sell relentlessly, that nothing is possible. They're doing the best they can. Their hands are tied. It's the Republicans. It's the Supreme Court, et cetera, et cetera. At the very least, demand they fight on this issue because it matters so much. This really blocks young people from being able to start their lives, to be able to, get the job that they want, not the one that they have to take because they got to make these payments, be able to buy a house, eventually be able to start a family, be able to start a business and take that risk if they want. This really holds people back. It's like a weight on the shoulders of multiple generations at this point.
Look, there should be no such thing as student debt. Like, we have public high school in this country. Nobody goes into debt to go to high school, right? Same with middle school, same with elementary school. We're just talking about making that the same for college. I think it's preposterous that the idea of student debt even exists. So look, blame first and foremost, let's be straightforward about this. It is with the Republican Supreme Court that struck this down.
100%.
And like I said, I was skeptical Biden would do anything at all in the first place, right? Never mind when some of these things got struck down in court, they kept appealing. So I was happy that they actually did it, and I was happy that they fought to some extent. So the blame lies first and foremost with this right-wing Supreme Court. But I will say, Democrats, you have to fight. You have to not take no for an answer. Because if you don't, there's a reason why, you have people like Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis are, effectively tied with Joe Biden. These people should be comically easy to beat, right? You have to materially deliver for people, learn from Lincoln, learn from FDR, learn from LBJ, grow some fucking balls,
learn from the
norms
checks
humping.
That won the Georgia Senate races, the fact that those hinged on stimulus checks. These things are very powerful and really important besides.
So anyway, mega fuck you to the activist Supreme Court, the far-right Supreme Court, which has already lost legitimacy. Their approval rating is 29%. They had a couple pro-democracy opinions within the past few days, which sort of in theory made John Roberts be like, oh, maybe, hey, guys, look, we're doing something okay. We didn't totally destroy democracy. But now, of course, they go right back to their standard tricks and their standard decisions. And look, it's ugly. The Supreme Court will maintain a very low approval rating. They've lost integrity, they've lost honor, they've lost legitimacy. And you mean at a time when trust in our institutions is at a record low, you know, and now it's going to get even worse. So just can't let it stand. You can't let it stand. But of course, I fear that that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, same.